We have so many things going on in this patch that they don't even fit onto one page. Find out what's going on as I hereby invite everyone to join me on my adventures through Marvel Snap. Hey everybody, it's Annabelle. So we got most likely, if not, the biggest patch that has ever come out and might come out for a very long time. 13 total changes that are happening to Marvel Snap at this time. Now, part of me thinks that this is because they're going to take a break and not have the next OTA patch come around, and that half of these are going to be in the next patch, especially the one that I want to talk about first and foremost, which is Surtur. I honestly think they were going to wait 2 weeks to see where Surtur landed, figure out how it worked, but they didn't want to do that, and they didn't have the time to patch it, so they patched it now. So this one's really shocking to me, as usually they do not nerf the Season Pass card while the Season Pass is still running around. But Surtur actually got changed from a 3.5 to a 3.4. Everything else works exactly the same. I honestly am not shocked that this happened. I think this needed to happen. It was a 3.5 of upside. There was no reason not to play it, even just as a 3.5 alone. Just to get that one even buff was worth it. Even if you get this twice, you're still going to hit 10, so that's not breaking the 10 threshold. And that was what it was supposed to be used for, so I am really not shocked this needed to happen, except for the fact that it happened while the Season Pass was still up. I figured in 2 weeks is when you finally get this nerf happen. There's a part of me that almost wants to change to a 3-2 and it giving +4 power. So it's a weak card but a powerful strike if you can get it to work. But yeah, this one was needed but shocked that this happened. Speaking of Season Pass cards, Agent Venom got a slight nerf buff switch combo thingy. So Agent Venom went from a 2.4 to a 2.5, so it went up 1 in power. But instead of setting all your deck to 4, it now sets your deck to 3. I still want a Koye to set your deck to 2. I don't think that'd be broken for a Koye, and I'm not sure this is going to touch Agent Venom in any way, shape, or form. He's already been kind of taking a down slip here. Even before this happened, he wasn't getting as much play. But a 2.5, that's a ridiculous power line. That might be the strongest too. Hang on, let me look at 2 real quick. Let me just look at 2 real quick. That is pretty much the strongest 2 that you can get with no real downside. Very little is changing the downside of that. So that might even be more of an upset since that's such a power spike to happen on too. Next one that we have up on the Nerf Cavalcade here, and we are going to move on to the card that was going to take advantage of the Surtur, which is Skaar. Skaar got changed from a 6'11 to a 6'10, sorry. Still exactly the same. I think at one point they had this as a 6'10, but he wasn't doing what he needed to do. And honestly, a 6'10's not that great. You have 4'10s nowadays, and to need 10s out there, I don't think according to the game, this was the most broken card because it could get down to 0. And honestly, anything that can get down to 0 is a kind of a broken card. But it took making a deck around it to have it happen. And there are other decks that exist that can get way higher than this with way less effort And to really take and knock down a card that was just starting to see some experimentation because it was doing good is kind of sad, as the Tens deck was a deck that was just starting to develop, and it takes a lot of cards to make that deck. Yes, there are some cards that are easy to get for it, but there are some cards that are hard to get for it, and it's not an auto-win deck. Next nerf that we have is Silver Sable. She went from a 1-1 to a 1-0, still steals 2 power from the top card of your opponent's deck. This was pretty much the strongest 1-drop, was the default one for everything. It was relatively a 1-3 that was actually a 1-5. Now this brings us down to basically a 1-4, which is still pretty strong, but that little nerf on her is enough, because when you're talking that low of numbers, it's 50% of her power that she used to have. Next one that we have up on the why did you do it in the first place question mark is Shadow King went from a 2-3 to a 2-2. Last patch, Shadow King went up and got the 3 power. Now he's bringing back down to 2. Leave him at 3. It's not that great. It's not that powerful. Let him see more play. It's really weird when you have this flip and then flip back of a card. And the whole idea was to get Shadow King to be played more, and now that Shadow King's being played more, you want to take off the powers. Just weird. Next one that we have on the nerf list, and yes, I am considering this a nerf, is Black Widow. Black Widow went from 3-3 to 3-4, so you're like, oh, that's a buff. But she's now an activate card. Now, this is a needed realm for, first of all, second dinner to have more activate cards, just in general, especially activate cards that the normal player can have, the non-Series 4, Series 5 player. This is a lower card that you get a hold of. Secondly, there was the start of a deck where on turn 3 you would play Black Widow, on turn 4 you'd play Grandmaster, and on turn 5 you would basically play, I think it's Agony, and basically, so turn 3 your opponent was getting a bite, turn 4 your opponent was getting a bite, and turn 5 your opponent was getting a bite. And that was just getting too ugly to imagine, because now the activate, you can't pull any of that shenanigans off. This is an anti-shenanigan card. This interaction with the Widow's Bite was the one reason why this card was not allowed into high voltage, because you could have played this down on turn 3 because you were getting 3 in high voltage pretty much no matter what, and then just copy it and then copy it again, and your opponent wouldn't have drawn a single card. Very happy they made this change. Very weird change, but glad it's an activate. Not sure when people are going to do the activates, but it is a nice little change to it. Now that we've gotten through all the nerfs, we can start looking at the buffs. First buff is the big buff of them all, Destroyer. Destroyer went from a 6-14 to a 6-16. This is now the granddaddy of them all, especially with the change that happened where Destroyer doesn't destroy the cards in its own lane. Destroyer could basically make sure that you win a lane. If you hit this on Shuri, that's a 32 power by itself. Next thing that we have up for the buff is we have Valentina. Valentina is still a 6-3 and still draws you a random 6-cost card, but instead of it getting -3 power, it now gets -2 power, basically falling into the Hella range. So it's doing the same thing that Hella does now, but for one card. Actually, it's doing a little bit better than Hella, because I think Hella's now -3. I'd have to double check on that. Let me double check on that real quick. Hello, what do you do? Yeah, Hella even does -3, so it's actually less negative power than even a Hella is. Next up on the weird world of, yes, I guess so, where was this on my bingo card? The Winter Soldier on Bucky Barnes has gotten a 1-point buff. Not sure why anybody needed that to be there, but kind of nice that it is there. Next up on the power scale is, for the first time in a long time, Jessica Jones gets to enter the 10s deck. Yes, that's right, Jessica Jones went from being a 4/5 to being a 4/5, but instead of getting +4 next turn, she gets +5 next turns. This puts her into the 4/10 category. Not going to work on Surtur because of how it's written, but will work on your Skaar. Another card that got to enter the 10s category is Heimdall. I honestly think Heimdall could take another point or two and not be broken. But what he does for move is so necessary for the move decks, and he's still such a small power spec to have happen off of that. Next on the buff train is, we've got one that I was not sure would ever get a buff. Mostly because I don't know if anybody ever actually plays this card, and that's Crystal. Crystal got changed from a 3/3 to a 3/4. Will that make Crystal playable? I highly doubt it. Crystal is almost at the point, where I'm not sure how you could change her to actually have people play her. Because the fact that both people draw on that, it's kind of annoying, because you really don't want to give your opponent draw, and draw is one of the hardest mechanics in Snap to balance around. One of the things that you could do with Crystal if you wanted to see your point is let you draw and not your opponent draw, but give it some negative effect, like you draw a card, but it has +1 energy or something like that. So a 3-cost normal card would be 4 for you to play instead. Kind of putting an Iceman on it. Maybe max 6, or even don't let it be max 6. And then at the last turn, then it will fall off, or even though you could fail on a 6. And the last one, the one that we have out here that doesn't even enter into the list because we had 12 here, and this is Mr. 13. So Mr. 13 for us is going to be Thanos. Thanos looks exactly the same, does exactly the same stuff, is exactly the same cost, exactly the same power, but with the huge change of now, he starts in your hand. And you're like, wait, didn't he always start in your hand? He starts in your hand as an extra card. So now he's got the Agatha effect. So instead of you having 3 cards and Thanos, you'll now have 4 cards and Thanos. This makes Thanos a really powerful card to have back again. So those are the changes, the buff, the nerf that have happened in this Marvel patch. They are currently out live. You can try them now. I want to thank you all so much for watching. And as always, remember, play for fun.